Where silence waits, the paper splits, and from the darkness behind the wall, it watches. Night wraps the room in soft absence. Tatami groans beneath breathless stillness. Only the breeze threading the crack in a forgotten shōji moves with intent. The paper is torn. It wasn't last night, you know that. And now there are eyes, not blinking, not moving, not alive, but there, fixed in the torn grid, observing, not the room, you. This is Mokumokuren, a yokai born from neglect, a gaze that blossoms in forgotten places. Where the seam splits, it emerges, not to harm, not to speak, simply to watch. Invisible eyes, Mokumokuren, the surveillance yokai. Let me tell you a story. Not one from a dusty scroll, but from a traveller, a real man who didn't want to pay for lodging. He found a vacant house, quiet, abandoned. He pushed open the door and laid out his futon beneath faded beams and torn shōji. That night, the paper moved. In the ragged holes, eyes. Not glowing, not blinking, just watching. One eye, then two, then more. The man wrapped his blanket around his head, refusing to look, refusing to acknowledge. But the eyes persisted. He kept his head buried, hoping ignorance would protect him. Morning came. The paper no longer watched. He breathed. He reached for light and found darkness. His eyes were gone. Not gouged, not stolen, simply absent. No blood, no trace, just him, blind. And the house quietly aware of his fear. They say Mokumokuren doesn't harm, that it simply watches. But this man chose blindness over acknowledgement, and the yokai honored his choice. What do you let out when no one's looking? Mokumokuren. The name means many eyes, or more hauntingly, continuous eyes. It first appeared in the illustrated yokai compendium Gazu Hyakyagyo, created by Toriyama Sekiei in the 18th century. A master of mythic cataloguing, Sekiei gave form to the unseen, and Mokumokuren was among his quietest horrors. This yokai lives in torn shōji screens, not behind them, in them. When the paper is neglected, when the holes remain unpatched, the eyes begin to bloom. One, then two, then dozens, watching, always watching. Some say Mokumokuren is a tsukumogami, a spirit born from an object that's reached its 100th year. Others call it a haunted echo, a presence that lingers in places once filled with life. There are regional variations. In one tale, a merchant wakes to find the entire wall staring at him. Instead of fleeing, he plucks out the eyes and sells them to an eye surgeon. Profit from fear. Resourcefulness or madness? But most stories agree, Mokumokuren doesn't chase, doesn't speak, it waits. And when you forget the wall, it remembers you. We live among watchers. Not spirits, not gods, but lenses, cameras in corners, microphones in pockets, every screen, every scroll, every tap. Observed. Mokumokuren was born in torn paper, but its gaze feels familiar. It doesn't chase, it doesn't speak. It waits and watches. A cracked phone screen, a dusty television left on in an empty room, a Ring doorbell camera still blinking on an abandoned home. These are our modern shōji, fractured, forgotten, and quietly watching. The damage doesn't erase the gaze. It distorts it, makes it harder to see who's watching or what they see in you. In folklore, Mokumokuren is a yokai of neglect, but in metaphor, it's something more. A presence that emerges when we stop paying attention, when we let the cracks form, when we forget to patch the holes. Surveillance isn't always malicious. Sometimes it's passive. Sometimes it's just there, like eyes in the wall. The Mokumokuren doesn't punish. It reflects. It reminds that someone or something is always watching, not to act, just to know. And maybe that's the deepest fear, not being hurt, but being seen. Not every haunting screams, some just watch. Mokumokuren doesn't chase you down a hallway. It doesn't whisper your name. It waits in the quiet, in the torn. It thrives in liminal spaces, thresholds, transitions, places meant for rest, bedrooms, guest rooms, abandoned inns, and yes, maybe even the back rooms. It watches when you're most vulnerable, not in motion but in stillness, not in fear but in forgetfulness. You patch the paper, you turn off the light, you sleep, but the eyes remain. There's no malice, just presence, and that's what unsettles us. Because we fear being seen when we're not ready, when we're not performing, when we're not armored. Mokumokuren is the gaze that finds you in your unguarded moment, not to judge, not to punish, just to exist. And in that existence, it asks a question. What part of you do you let out when no one's looking? And what happens when something is? Mokumokuren isn't just a ghost story. It's a mirror of how Japanese culture sees the unseen. In traditional homes, shōji screens aren't just architecture, they're boundaries between inside and outside, between privacy and presence. When those boundaries tear, something ancient steps through. In Japan, cleanliness and order aren't just aesthetic, they're spiritual. A torn screen isn't just damage, it's neglect. And neglect invites presence. Mokumokuren emerges not from violence, but from disorder. It's a reminder, when we stop caring for our spaces, something begins to care about us. And then there are the eyes. In Japanese art and myth, eyes symbolize awareness, judgment, and memory. They're sacred. They're dangerous. They're everywhere. From Daruma dolls to temple guardians, eyes are painted with purpose, to watch, to protect, to remember. But Mokumokuren's eyes don't protect. They just observe. They multiply. They fill the gaps we forgot to patch. It's not just a yokai. It's a symbol of boundaries, of neglect, of the quiet things we choose not to see. You've seen the eyes, heard the story, felt the silence. Mokumokuren doesn't demand belief. It just waits for your attention to falter, for a wall to wear thin, for the moment when something forgotten starts to remember you. We patch our screens. We tape over cameras. We scroll past signs of presence, and still the watchers persist. In the paper, in the pixels, in the places we no longer look. It's not the violence that lingers. It's the awareness, the knowing, the quiet. Because some hauntings don't echo, they observe. And when they do, maybe you're not the only one choosing what to reveal. Leave your mark before the wall watches back. Like, comment, and subscribe to keep the myth alive. Explore the curated affiliate links in the description, each one tailored to this story if you're ready to dive deeper into the folklore, symbolism, and cultural echoes behind Mokumokuren. Help us grow our myth library registry. Every title added strengthens the archive and the stories we share. And if you'd like to support Myth Merchant directly, join us on Patreon, where the walls are patched, but the stories still watch. Be careful where you sleep, especially if the shōji is torn.